A former Jacksonville Jaguar faces possible jail time after a deadly crash, even though his car was the one that got rear-ended. First Coast News reporter Eric Alvarez is live tonight at the courthouse to explain how he went from the gridiron to the courtroom. Eric?
Well, Julius Williams only played one season with the Jaguars back in 2009. 6 years later, he and another former NFL player were driving down Interstate 10 to watch the Jags play when a semi smashed into the back of their car.
By the grace of God, we survived.
Anthony Smith won Super Bowls with the Steelers and the Packers. On November 19, 2015, on the way to a Thursday night Jags game, a semi struck the back of the car, driven by friend and former Jaguar, Julius Williams.
Ended up fishtailing, then got T-boned.
The driver of the semi died.
We mourn for the loss of the other family, but, you know, it was just an unfortunate situation, an unfortunate accident.
In March of 2017, 15 months after the crash, Williams was charged with vehicular homicide. The arrest warrant says Williams was traveling in an aggressive and erratic manner when he crossed into the path of the semi, preventing driver Louis Parada from avoiding the crash. A jury found Williams not guilty of vehicular homicide, but he still faces up to 90 days in jail after being convicted on the lesser charge of reckless driving.
It's disheartening. However, I'm very grateful that the jury was able to see that Mr. Williams was not responsible for the fatality.
Williams appeared at the Duval County Courthouse Monday, where friends planned to speak on his behalf. That appearance got pushed back because the family of the semi driver didn't appear in court. Williams' agent, Bobby Morgan, is asking for community service.
It really hurts. I mean, he was hit from behind.
Smith, who works with Williams helping Atlanta kids through the group Battle of the Trenches, says he'd do more good serving kids than serving time.
We definitely can't lose a guy like Julius.
Williams' attorneys advised him not to answer questions on camera, but First Coast News did catch a candid moment as he walked out of the courthouse, having to wait even longer to find out if he'll end up a free man or behind bars.
Pay for everything, will be fine though.
Now, Williams is due back in here in court on Friday. The state attorney's office will not comment until after sentencing. Eric Alvarez, First Coast News, on your side.